Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laiq Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and the motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are near the summit of Ep.8, the pure abstract language. We have journeyed through the alphabet, grammar, and semantics. We have seen how information is born from constraint and how complexity is measured by depth. Our language is now rich and generative. But a truly powerful language must be able to do more than just describe the present moment. It must be able to hold on to the past, to let history shape the present. Today, we take this essential step. We explore how the phi language, purely through its own internal structure, can remember. This is part 23, Memory as Hysteresis. Part 23.1, the story core, the path that leaves a trace. Imagine you are walking on a wide, sandy beach. The tide is out. The sand is flat and smooth. You take a step. Your foot leaves a footprint. You keep walking, leaving a trail of footprints behind you. Now you stop and look back. The sand right under your feet is just sand. If someone only looked there, they would see nothing special. But the path you took is recorded in the line of footprints stretching behind you. The beach is no longer just a blank surface. It now carries a memory of your journey. You can leave, the wind can blow, the water can rise. And yet for a while, those footprints will remain. They are not the journey itself, but they are a record of it, a quiet reminder that something passed this way. If another person arrives later and follows your footprints, they can reconstruct your path long after you have gone. The landscape has been changed in a way that keeps your story alive. This is the essence of hysteresis. Hysteresis is what happens when the current state of a system depends not only on what is happening right now, but also on the path that led to this moment. The present carries an echo of the past. The footprints are a memory carved into the sand by your motion. In the phi language, the flat sand is a simple, almost featureless configuration of phi. Your steps are events that deform that configuration, changing the value of phi and its derivatives along your path. Hysteresis is the rule that says, the system cannot be fully understood just by looking at its current phi value at a single point. To know why things are the way they are, you must also know how they got there. The language becomes path-dependent. Part 23.2, the linguistic role, grammar that remembers. Once upon a time. In our language metaphor, hysteresis is like a grammar that allows sentences to carry their own backstory. When you hear a story that begins with once upon a time, everything that follows is anchored to that opening. The same sentence can mean something very different depending on what has already been said. Imagine jumping into the middle of a story and hearing, and then the dragon finally slept. If you do not know the earlier parts, you do not understand why the dragon was angry, who fought it, or why sleep is such a relief. The present sentence depends on previous sentences. The meaning is path-dependent. Now compare that to a dictionary entry. When you read the meaning of a single word in a dictionary, you do not need to know the history of how the word has been used in a story. The entry is meant to stand alone. It is context-free. Many simple systems in physics behave like dictionary entries. Their present state tells you everything you need to know to predict their near future. In a non-hysteretic system, the present state contains everything you need to know. If you reverse time, the system simply runs backward along the same path. Nothing is lost. Many idealized physical models behave like this when we ignore friction, noise, and history. In a hysteretic system, this reversibility is broken. Two systems can have the same present value of phi, but behave differently because they arrived there by different routes. The grammar now contains if and because clauses that refer to history. A hysteretic rule sounds like this. If phi has just arrived here by increasing from below, respond in one way. If phi has just arrived here by decreasing from above, respond in another way. The same present value leads to different futures because the past is different. Part 23.3. The scientific essence. Asking, how did you get here? Up to now, we have asked many questions of phi that focus on the present. How fast are you changing in time? That is omega. How fast are you changing in space? That is k. How is that change itself changing? Those are higher derivatives, like curvature and beyond. All of these are questions about the immediate structure of phi. Hysteresis asks a different question. How did you get here? Did this configuration grow slowly from a lower state, or did it fall down from a higher one? Was this slope created gently, or was it forced violently? Did you arrive by one path, or by another? Let us see this in the three familiar echoes of our language: time, space, and motion. In the time echo, think of a click pen. You press the button once. Click, the tip comes out. You press again. Click, the tip goes in. If you stop with the button in the middle of its travel, whether the tip is out or in depends on the sequence of presses, not just the current position of the button. The same button position can correspond to two different internal states. The mechanism has memory. The present outcome depends on the past. You can press the button gently or harshly, slowly or quickly. As long as you complete the same sequence of clicks, the final state will be the same. What matters is not the detailed speed of pressing, but the order of events. The pen's internal mechanism has a small state space with multiple stable positions, and it moves between them in a path-dependent way. This is a tiny everyday example of hysteresis. In the space echo, think of a piece of paper. At first, it is perfectly flat. You fold it strongly along a line, then unfold it. The paper seems flat again, but it is not the same. If you try to bend it, it naturally wants to fold along the old crease. The region of the crease has microscopic changes in its internal structure. The spatial derivatives of phi that describe the paper's stiffness are now different along that line. The paper remembers being folded. You could even iron the paper to make it look smoother, but under certain conditions, the memory of the fold still guides how it wants to bend. The history of stress and strain has become part of the paper's internal language. The visible shape is only part of the story. The invisible changes in its fiber structure encode the rest. In the motion echo, think of moving a heavy wooden crate on the floor. At first, it resists your push. You must apply a strong force to get it to start sliding. Once it is moving, it is easier to keep it going. The force needed to start it is different from the force needed to keep it moving at the same speed. The frictional response depends on whether the crate was previously at rest or already in motion. The motion remembers its recent past. Here, the same speed can correspond to different internal configurations at the contact surface between crate and floor. If the crate has been still for a long time, microscopic contact points lock together more strongly. Once they break, the surface behaves differently. The phi field describing those contacts carries a record of how long it has been at rest. In all of these cases, we are seeing hysteresis. The present behavior cannot be predicted from the current state alone. You must also know something about the path that was taken. The phi field here carries a trace of its history in the form of altered derivatives, modified potentials, or shifted response rules. Part 23.4. The position in the master tree. Loops and folds in state space. Now imagine the master tree of the Holophase language. Each point on a branch represents a possible combination of phi and its derivatives. For a simple, non-hysteretic system, moving through this tree is like sliding along a line. If you go out and come back along the same route, you return exactly to where you started. The path is reversible. For a hysteretic system, the tree is more intricate. There may be two or more distinct paths through the tree that all arrive at the same value of phi, but with different hidden tags representing history. It is as if the branch of the tree splits, loops, and rejoins, forming a small loop in state space. Going around this loop brings you back to the same visible value of phi, but the internal state of the system is not the same. You can picture this as writing not only the value of phi on a leaf, but also the story of how that leaf grew. Two leaves may look identical from one angle, but one may have grown straight while another was bent and straightened. Hysteresis is the difference between those two stories. If you could mark each point in state space not just with numbers for phi and its derivatives, but also with arrows showing which way the system arrived there, you would see these loops very clearly. The system does not treat all routes equally. Some paths are easy, some are blocked, some require extra push to cross invisible ridges in the landscape. The master tree now has folds and overlaps, and hysteresis is the pattern of those folds. In more formal language, hysteresis can be thought of as a relationship between derivatives and integrals of phi. The present derivative may depend not only on the current value of phi, but also on the accumulated history of how phi has changed. This is how the tree folds back on itself and how loops in behavior arise. Part 23.5. The Neighbors. Holonomy, complexity, information, and action. Hysteresis does not live alone. It connects deeply with the ideas we have already met in Episode 8. Holonomy, which we encountered earlier, is the idea of going around the loop in space and returning with a different phase. It is a kind of geometric memory. Hysteresis is like holonomy extended into the space of states. Instead of walking around the spatial loop, you walk around the loop in the space of possible phi configurations. When you return, something has changed. A phase, a magnetization, a crease. The system has not come back to exactly the same state. Complexity, understood as derivation depth, also lives near hysteresis. A hysteretic system often needs a more elaborate recipe to describe it. You need rules that not only say, if phi is this, do that, but also say, if phi became this by the following path, do something else. This increases the derivative depth of the description. Memory usually comes at the price of complexity, because you must encode extra conditions that remember earlier steps. Information as constraint is directly involved too. A hysteretic system stores information about past events in its present structure. The crease in the paper is a constraint on how it can fold in the future. The magnetization of a material is a constraint that records past magnetic fields. The system has narrowed the space of future possibilities by having lived through a particular past. The action principle is also affected by hysteresis. In simple, reversible systems, the path taken between two states is the one that extremizes the action functional. It has the least or stationary cost according to the rules of the language. In hysteretic systems, there may be several possible paths between the same start and end points, and the effective action can depend on which path has already been taken. The field might get trapped in a local valley in its landscape of possibilities, unable to roll back to a previous configuration without an extra push. This is a memory written into the geometry of action. In this way, hysteresis acts as a bridge between static concepts like constraint and dynamic concepts like evolution. It shows us how the past can be distilled into subtle changes in the rules that govern the future. Part 23.6. The Semantic Meaning. How reality learns and persists. What kind of work does hysteresis do in the universe's story? It is the mechanism of persistence, habit, and learning. At the simplest level, hysteresis allows a system to stay in a new state even after the original cause has been removed. A magnetized piece of iron stays magnetized. A creased paper stays easy to fold along the same line. A door hinge that has rusted remains stiff even after the environment changes. This persistence is memory. It is the present carrying the trace of the past. At a richer level, hysteresis allows systems to adapt their future behavior based on past experience. A neuron that has fired repeatedly may change its sensitivity, making it easier or harder to fire in the future. A muscle that has been trained responds differently from an untrained one. In all these cases, the current response of the system depends on the history of inputs. The phi language has reshaped its own grammar in response to repeated patterns. You can think of hysteresis as reality practicing a phrase until it becomes easier to say. The first time a pattern of change moves through the phi field, it may meet resistance. If that pattern repeats many times, the field may gradually rearrange itself to make that pattern smoother, quicker, or more likely. The path becomes a trail, the trail becomes a road, and the road becomes a highway. This is learning in the broadest sense. This is the seed of learning. When the holophase is able to alter its own response rules based on the paths it has experienced, it is beginning to write a deeper story. Not just about what happens, but about how what happens changes what can happen next. Memory as hysteresis is the foundation of this self-modifying behavior. Part 23.7. The holophase memory thesis and its test. To make this idea scientifically meaningful, we attach a clear claim to it. We can call it the holophase memory thesis. It says, whenever we see a genuine physical memory effect, where the present behavior depends on the past in a stable and causal way, that memory should be expressible as hysteresis in some phi field description. Consider magnetic hysteresis as a concrete example. In a ferromagnetic material, the relationship between the applied magnetic field and the resulting magnetization traces out the loop when we increase and then decrease the field. The up curve and the down curve are different. The material remembers how strongly it was magnetized in the past. We can model this by imagining that the magnetic domains correspond to regions of phi trapped in different valleys of a potential landscape. As we change the external field, we tilt this landscape. Domains jump from one valley to another only when the barrier is low enough. When we reverse the field, they do not all jump back at the same point. The loop appears. The test for the holophase picture is, can we always find some phi field and some derivative-based landscape that reproduces the observed hysteresis curves in magnets, in elastic materials, in circuits, and in other systems with memory? If yes, then memory really is a property of how phi moves through its own landscape of possibilities. We can imagine designing experiments in which we slowly drive a system around different loops in its space of states, and then ask whether a holophase model can predict not only the final state, but also the shape and area of the loop. The shape of the loop tells us how much effort is lost and how much is stored. If the model matches, the memory has been captured. If, however, we found a memory effect that cannot be mapped onto any such field description, we would face a limit. For instance, if there were a system whose present behavior depends on a distant event in a way that cannot be mediated by any continuous change in a field, or a system that stores memory with no detectable difference in any state variable we can assign to phi, then our language would be incomplete. Memory would require more than just the holophase. Part 23.8. Examples across scales. Let us ground this in more examples. In everyday physics and engineering, a thermostat often has a built-in hysteresis band. It might turn the heater on when the temperature falls to 19 degrees and turn it off when it reaches 21. The heater does not flicker on and off at 20 degrees. The state of the system depends on whether the temperature is rising or falling. The present decision depends on the recent path. In materials, stretching a metal paperclip gently lets it spring back to its original shape. Stretching it too far leaves it permanently bent. The metal's internal phi field has crossed the threshold. Atoms have slipped into new positions. The new arrangement is a record of the large strain. The paperclip remembers being overstretched. In chemistry, some reaction networks have two stable states. If you start with one set of initial conditions, the system flows toward one state. If you start with another, it flows toward the other state, even if the present external conditions eventually become the same. The concentrations of the chemicals have become a memory of how the system was prepared. In biology, your immune system is a vast hysteretic machine. Once it encounters a particular virus, it changes its internal state by creating specific memory cells. Years later, the same virus triggers a faster and stronger response. The current configuration of your immune system stores a long-term record of past encounters. In neuroscience, long-term potentiation and long-term depression of synapses are forms of hysteresis. The strength of a synaptic connection changes based on the history of activity. A single spike may do little. A repeated pattern of spikes creates lasting change. The brain's phi pattern remembers its own activity, building habits of thought and reflex. Even at the scale of society, we see hysteresis. Institutions, cultures, and traditions respond to current events in ways shaped by long history. Two societies facing the same present challenge can respond very differently because they carry different historical scars and stories written into their collective field. In human life, trust and trauma behave hysteretically. The same action from another person can feel very different depending on shared history. A friendly joke from a trusted friend feels light. The same words from someone who hurt you deeply may feel cruel. The present moment is interpreted through the path that led there. Part 23.9. Recognition skill. Seeing the lag, the loop, and the it depends. To develop an intuitive sense for hysteresis in your own perception, look for three signatures. First, look for lag. Does the system respond slowly, as if dragging the memory of its past with it? The door that only starts moving after a strong shove and then keeps moving even when you reduce the force is showing lag. The muscles that feel stiff in the morning and relax after you move for a while are showing lag too. Second, look for loops. If you can vary a control parameter up and down and find that the path of responses traces a loop rather than a single line, you are seeing hysteresis. Magnetic loops, stress-strain curves in materials, and many biological responses show this behavior. If you ever notice that increasing and decreasing give different results, you are probably looking at a loop. Third, look for the phrase, "It depends on how we got here." When doctors, engineers, therapists, or parents say these words, they are often pointing at hysteretic effects. Healing a wound, tuning a machine, or guiding a child all involve taking history into account. The path matters. The present is not enough. You can turn this into a small daily exercise. Pick any system around you, a device, a habit, a relationship, and ask, would this be different if the last few steps of its history had been different? If the answer is yes, you are looking at a memory trace, a little piece of hysteresis in action. Part 23.10. Return to phi, the field that carries its past. We return, as always, to the single field. Memory is not something added on top of phi. It is not a separate substance that floats above the physical world. In the holophase picture, memory is what happens when phi and its derivatives arrange themselves so that the present pattern depends on the path already traveled. The holophase is then not just a field of instantaneous values, but a field whose structure has been carved by time. Every crease, every scar, every habit, every learned response in the universe is, in this view, a particular hysteretic configuration of phi. The one field carries its own autobiography written into its derivatives. In Episode 8, we have almost completed our exploration of the pure abstract language. We have seen phi as a cyclic field, watched derivatives create dimensions, explored topological structure, semantic meaning, intensity, optimality, modes, information, complexity, and now memory as hysteresis. Together, these show that the language of phi is not just able to describe a frozen world. It is able to tell stories, keep them, and let them matter. When we later attach this language to physics, biology, and mind, hysteresis will become the bridge between simple laws and lived experience. It will explain how laws can generate systems that have habits, personalities, and histories, all while still being made from the same underlying field. Our next part will take one final step in this abstract information wing. We will ask whether this language, with all of its structure, is powerful enough to carry out any possible computation. In other words, we will ask whether the holophase language is computationally universal, able to simulate any other rule-based system within its single continuous field. For now, as you look around your own life, try to see not only what things are, but what they have lived through. In the worn handle of a favorite mug, in the grooves of a stone step, in the patterns of your own reactions, see the hysteresis of phi. You are beginning to perceive reality not as a sequence of isolated frames, but as a living story written into the fabric of a single field. As you reflect on this, notice how comforting and humbling this picture can be. It means that no experience is completely lost. When something happens, it leaves a trace somewhere in the great field, even if that trace is soft, dispersed, or hard to read. In simple systems, the memory may fade quickly. In complex systems, especially in living beings, the memory can persist for years or decades. In you, in me, in every mind that listens to these words, phi has arranged itself into patterns that were not there before. Your understanding right now is itself a new hysteretic configuration, a fresh pattern that will slightly change how you listen, how you see, and how you move through the world from this moment onward. In this way, learning the holophase language is not just an abstract exercise. It is the field looking at itself and adjusting its own patterns. Each time you revisit these ideas, some parts will feel more familiar. Others will click into place for the first time. That is hysteresis at work in your own cognitive field. The path of ideas you have already walked will make certain future insights easier, just as an old trail through a forest makes the next walk smoother and faster. Each revisit deepens the pattern further. Salam and peace be upon you.